Let's get started with today's story. They say the truth has a way of finding you, no matter how deeply you bury it. I've been married to Julia for 9 years, and until recently, I thought we were solid enough to trust her completely. When she mentioned this girl's trip to Miami, she said she needed a break, a few nights out with her friends, just to relax and unwind. And you know what? I didn't think twice about it. I mean, Julia and I never kept secrets, or so I thought. The night she left, I stayed home watching reruns in the living room and trying not to notice how quiet the house felt without her. I checked my phone now and then, waiting for a text from Julia to let me know she'd arrived safely. Around 9 p.m., I got her message. Just checked in, babe. The hotel is beautiful. Wish you were here. Love you. I sent back a quick, love you too, babe. Have fun, and thought nothing more of it. Little did I know, that was the last peaceful night I'd have for a while. Later, as I sat in the dim glow of the TV, my phone rang. It was Ethan, an old friend from college. We hadn't spoken in years, but he sounded tense. "Jack," he asked, his voice low, like he didn't want anyone to overhear. "Yeah, it's me, Ethan. Long time no talk. What's up, man?" I tried to sound cheerful, though it was pretty odd to hear from him after all these years. "Jack, I don't really know how to say this." His voice trailed off, and my heart started pounding. I'd never heard him like this. "What's going on, Ethan? You okay?" "Listen, I saw Julia tonight. In Miami." He took a deep breath. "She wasn't alone." I froze. "What do you mean, she wasn't alone?" "I mean, she was with another guy, Jack. They were close. Dancing. Touching. I think something's going on, man." There was a long pause. I felt like I'd been hit in the gut. Are you sure it was her?" I finally managed to say, although I already knew the answer. "I'm sure, Jack. I saw her with my own eyes." He hesitated. "Listen, do you want me to keep an eye on her?" "Yes, absolutely." The words left my mouth before I could think twice. "Follow them. Let me know if anything happens." And that was it. I didn't sleep a wink that night. Every time my phone buzzed with a text, I half expected it to be Ethan with some new nightmare of an update. The next morning, I didn't waste a second. I booked the first flight to Miami, threw a few clothes into a bag, and left without a word to Julia. No texts. No warning. I was done with wondering, done with giving her the benefit of the doubt. I needed to see it for myself, to catch her in the act, leave no room for lies or excuses. She wasn't going to admit it, and I wasn't interested in whatever story she'd spin when she came home. If Julia wouldn't tell me the truth, then I'd get it myself. I landed in Miami that afternoon and met up with Ethan. We sat in a dimly lit coffee shop near the beach. He looked just as uneasy as I felt. "I'm sorry, Jack," he said as we sat down. "But I knew you'd want to know." I nodded, my throat tight. "Where did you see them?" "They went from the club to a bar on Ocean Drive," he said, frowning. "They were close, man. Real close." "Did you see them kiss?" I asked, each word coming out like I was choking on them. Ethan looked down, then back at me, his face tight with sympathy and a hint of anger on my behalf. "Yes," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I did. It wasn't just some drunken slip, Jack. They were into each other, like no one else in the world mattered. They didn't even notice me standing there." The weight of his words settled like lead in my stomach. But Ethan wasn't finished. "And after they left the bar." He hesitated, as if he didn't want to continue, but he knew I needed to hear it. "They went back to her hotel room." The words hit me like a blow to the chest. The image of Julia, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone, wrapped around another man, leading him up to her room, played like a twisted reel in my mind. My fists clenched, and a fire spread through me, one I couldn't shake off. "They went up together?" I forced out, my voice shaking despite my efforts to stay calm. Ethan nodded, his eyes filled with the same disbelief that was tearing me apart. I followed at a distance, just enough to see them go inside. They stayed there, Jack. The door closed, and neither of them came back out. I felt a surge of fury that made my whole body shake. Ethan watched me, a silent witness to the war raging inside me, and after a few moments he placed a hand on my shoulder. "I don't get it, Ethan. Why would she do this?" He shrugged, looking as clueless as I felt. "Only she knows, Jack." We decided to wait until evening to see if Julia would meet up with the guy again. And sure enough, around 8 o'clock, we spotted her at a restaurant with her friends, and him. They were sitting at an outdoor table, laughing, and she leaned in close to him, their hands brushing. And then it happened. She kissed him. I didn't even realize I'd gotten up until Ethan grabbed my arm. "Jack, wait. Are you sure you want to do this here?" But I was done waiting. I stormed over to their table, and Julia's eyes widened as she saw me. She froze, looking as if she'd seen a ghost. "Jack," she stammered, her face pale. What are you doing here?" "Oh, I don't know," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Maybe just catching my wife making out with another guy in the middle of Miami." The whole table went silent, her friends staring at us with wide eyes. Julia's so-called lover looked down at his plate, mumbling something before he stood up and scurried off like the coward he was. Pathetic. "Jack, please," Julia started, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. I don't even know what I was thinking." "No, you don't know what you were thinking. You came all the way here to cheat on me, and you don't know what you were thinking." My voice rose, and I felt everyone at the restaurant turning to watch, but I didn't care. I felt a surge of anger and betrayal that I couldn't hold back. "Please, Jack, just, let's go somewhere and talk. I don't want to lose you." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Talk? You didn't want to talk before you decided to throw away everything we had, did you?" She covered her face with her hands, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm sorry. Please, I am begging you, let's go somewhere and talk about this. Just you and me, please." But I shook my head. "We're done, Julia. I'm calling a lawyer first thing tomorrow. 9 years, and this is what you do." As I turned to leave, one of Julia's friends grabbed my arm. "Jack, wait." Her voice was soft, almost pleading. "It doesn't have to end like this. Talk to her." I looked at her. Rebecca, I remembered her name was. She had always been friendly, a little too friendly if I'm being honest, but right now her eyes looked different, more intense, like she was seeing me for the first time. "I don't think there's anything to talk about," I replied, shaking my head. "Julia made her choice." Rebecca didn't say anything for a moment, then she gave me a small, hesitant smile. "You're a good man, Jack. You deserve better." She gave my hand a squeeze before letting go. I looked back at Julia one last time, who was now sobbing uncontrollably, her friends trying to comfort her. But I couldn't feel sorry for her, not after what she'd done. The next day, I called my lawyer to get the divorce process started. I planned to stay in Miami a few more days, partly to clear my head and partly just to get a fresh start before going back home. Rebecca reached out to me later that day, asking if I wanted to meet up. She thought I might need some company, someone to talk to. We met at a beachside bar, and for the first time in days, I felt like I could actually breathe. We ordered drinks, and we talked about everything. Rebecca shared that she too was divorced. Her husband had cheated on her with his secretary. She also told me that she'd known Julia for years, but always believed I was the one who truly held our marriage together. I've always thought you were too good for her, you know, Rebecca said, swirling her drink. I've seen the way you look at her, like she's the only woman in the world. I don't know why she did it. I wish I knew too, I replied, staring out at the ocean. But it doesn't matter now. I'm done. Rebecca leaned in closer, her hand lightly touching mine. If you ever need someone to talk to, or anything else, I'm here. She paused, her gaze steady, and then added softly, You're the kind of man who deserves better. Someone who values what you bring into a relationship. We locked eyes, and suddenly I was aware of how close she was. She wasn't like Julia, that was for sure. She was confident, bold, and there was a spark between us that I hadn't felt in a long time. One thing led to another, and by the end of the night we were back in my hotel room. It was unexpected, but in that moment I felt like I was finally letting go of all the anger and betrayal. That night, Julia showed up at my hotel room looking like a wreck. She must have found out from one of her friends where I was staying. "Jack, please," she sobbed, her voice hoarse. "Don't do this. I made a mistake, okay? A horrible, horrible mistake. But I love you. I don't want to lose you. Julia, you should have thought about that before you threw away everything we had." She dropped her face into her hands, crying harder. "I don't know what I was thinking. It was stupid. It was a mistake. I was drunk, and he didn't mean anything to me." "Doesn't matter, Julia," I replied coldly. "You made your choice, and I've made mine." At that moment, Rebecca stepped out of the bathroom wearing one of my shirts, its hem barely skimming her thighs. She was bare below the waist, her legs exposed, giving no illusion of innocence in this situation. She looked at Julia with a gaze that held both pity and a hint of satisfaction. "Rebecca!" Julia looked stunned, her eyes darting between us, realization dawning. "Oh my God, Jack! Are you too?" I didn't bother denying it. "Why does it matter, Julia? We're done, remember?" Julia's expression went from heartbreak to pure rage. "You've known her for years. She was my friend, Jack. How could you? How could you betray me like this?" I laughed bitterly. "You're asking me that, after what you did?" Rebecca stepped forward, her gaze steady. "Maybe it's time you accept that you broke his heart, Julia, and someone else picked up the pieces." Julia's face contorted, her anger boiling over. She let out a choked sob before lunging at Rebecca, grabbing her hair with a fierce grip. "With my husband, you heartless!" she screamed, her voice breaking. "You were my friend. How could you do this to me?" Rebecca gasped in pain, but before Julia could do more, I forced myself between them, gripping Julia's arm to pull her away. "That's enough," I said firmly, holding her back. "Get out, Julia. I don't want to see you again." Julia's anger faded into something fragile, her eyes glassy with fresh tears as she looked at me, devastated. She stumbled toward the door, still sobbing, and with a final trembling glare, she turned and left, slamming the door behind her. But I didn't feel an ounce of remorse. For the first time since that phone call from Ethan, I felt free. 6 months later, the divorce was finalized, and Rebecca was by my side. It was ironic, in a way. The woman Julia had trusted was the one who ultimately showed me what I'd been missing all along. Rebecca and I had moved to a new city, far from Julia, and eventually we got married. We kept the ceremony small and intimate, just close friends and family, but it was exactly what I'd hoped for. Together, we made a fresh start, and for the first time, I knew what real love and trust felt like. As for Julia, I hadn't spoken to her since the divorce was finalized. I did hear, though, that she'd started dating again, having a few relationships that never seemed to last. She was constantly breaking up with people, but honestly, I didn't care. I was happy with Rebecca, and that was all that mattered to me now. Thank you for watching.